It was one of those nights where the rain seemed endless. Heavy sheets of it lashed against the windows, drowning out all other sounds. My family was away for the weekend, leaving me alone in our quiet, tucked-away suburban home. I didn't mind being alone. I usually enjoyed it, but tonight, something felt off. I settled into the couch, dimming the lights and putting on my favorite horror movie, the kind that usually makes me forget everything else. The wind howled outside, and the house creaked like it was alive, groaning with every gust. I brushed it off. It's just the storm. It's always like this when the weather's bad. But as the movie played, I couldn't shake this feeling, like the house wasn't empty. The air felt heavy, thicker somehow, like I wasn't really alone. I tried to focus on the screen, telling myself it was just my imagination. Yet, that unease lingered, creeping in like a shadow I couldn't quite see, but could definitely feel. About halfway through the movie, I started to hear something strange. At first, it was just a faint noise, barely noticeable beneath the sound of the storm. I turned up the volume, trying to drown it out, but it kept coming back, soft, almost like whispers. I paused for a second, listening. It had to be the wind, maybe the rain hitting the windows in some weird way. I'd seen enough horror movies to know how easy it is to start imagining things, especially on a night like this. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the house settling or the soundtrack blending too well with the storm outside. But then, it happened again. The whispers were clearer this time, like someone was trying to speak just out of earshot. They seemed to drift through the room, almost like they were coming from the walls themselves. I paused the movie, staring into the darkened corners of the living room. The sound cut off instantly, leaving only the pounding rain and wind howling outside. My heart started to race a little. A chill crawled down my spine, the kind that makes your skin prickle even though there's no reason for it. "It's nothing," I muttered to myself. Maybe the sound system was just acting up, or maybe I was getting too wrapped up in the movie. It had to be something simple, something logical. But as much as I tried to tell myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. It was all in my head, wasn't it? I tried to get back into the movie, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They were getting louder now, more distinct. No longer just a distant noise, they seemed to echo through the house, bouncing off the walls. My stomach tightened as the realization hit me. This wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the rain. These whispers were real. I muted the TV, sitting there in complete silence, just listening. The whispers didn't stop. They seemed to shift, moving from one side of the room to the other, like someone or something was walking through the house, speaking in hushed tones. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell was going on? I got up from the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. I checked the windows first, making sure they were locked. Then I peeked into the hallway, half expecting to see someone standing there in the dark. But there was nothing. The house was empty, just like it had been all night. Still, the whispers continued, but now, they were saying something. Not just indistinct murmurs anymore. My name. I heard it, clear as day, whispered over and over again. "Clark, Clark." And they were coming from the basement. I froze at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkness below. For some reason, I couldn't move. A memory bubbled up in my mind, something I hadn't thought about in years. That old doll from my childhood. I hadn't seen it in ages. We'd put it in storage down in the basement. I used to be terrified of it as a kid, always felt like it was watching me. Now, the thought of it sent a shiver down my spine. The whispers called my name again, drifting up from the basement like a cold breath. I stood there, paralyzed, unsure if I should go down or stay hidden in the light. I don't know why I did it, but I forced myself to go down the stairs. Every creak beneath my feet made me want to turn back, but the whispers kept calling my name, pulling me deeper into the dark, damp basement. The air was heavy, thick with dust and something else, something I couldn't explain. My skin prickled with every step I took. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, echoing off the walls. But they were coming from one place. I could feel it, and then I saw it. The doll. It was sitting on a dusty shelf in the corner, its glass eyes staring straight at me. I hadn't touched it in years, hadn't even thought about it. But there it was, out of storage, looking just like I remembered. Only now something was wrong. Felt alive. Clark. The whisper came again, but this time, there was no mistaking it. The voice was coming from the doll. My heart pounded in my ears, my breath catching in my throat. And then, in the dim light, the doll slowly turned its head toward me. Its lifeless lips didn't move, but I heard it clear as day. Clark! I stood there, frozen in terror, as the whispers echoed through the basement one last time. It was the kind of storm that made the world feel smaller, like everything outside the walls of the house didn't exist. I was sitting on the couch in my grandparents' living room, the old place creaking with every gust of wind. The rain pounded against the windows, and the thunder seemed to shake the ground itself. Even though I'd been here dozens of times before, something about the house felt different tonight, like I was more alone than I'd ever been. I tried to focus on my phone, scrolling mindlessly, but the Wi-Fi kept cutting out. The TV flickered once, then went black. Great, that's when I first heard it. A faint, steady tapping. I thought it was just the rain hitting the glass, but it kept going, a little too slow, a little too deliberate. Top, top, top. I glanced at the window, telling myself it was nothing, but my stomach tightened. I tried to ignore it, but the sound wouldn't stop. And the more I listened, the more I was sure it wasn't the rain. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, like someone was purposefully knocking, waiting for me to answer. I sat there, frozen, trying to pretend it wasn't happening, but the sound was impossible to ignore. Top, top, top. My heart started to race. It wasn't rain. Couldn't be. Curiosity got the better of me. I hesitated for a second, then slowly got up from the couch, the floor creaking under my feet as I moved toward the window. My hands felt clammy, and I had to wipe them on my jeans before gripping the curtain. I wasn't sure what I expected to see. Probably nothing, I told myself. Just my imagination running wild. I pulled the curtain aside, my eyes squinting through the rain-splattered glass. At first, all I could make out was the blur of the storm, the rain coming down in thick sheets. But then, in the middle of it all, I saw something. A figure. A dark, shadowy outline stood motionless just beyond the window, half hidden by the rain. It wasn't moving, just standing there. My breath caught in my throat. Maybe it was a trick of the light, I thought. Or maybe a tree. Yeah, probably just a tree swaying in the wind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The figure was too still, too solid to be a tree or a shadow. The longer I stared, the more my skin prickled with unease. I told myself it was nothing, that the storm was messing with my head. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I backed away from the window, my pulse racing, trying to convince myself that I hadn't seen what I thought I had. But the dread settled in, heavy, sinking into my bones. The tapping stopped. For a moment, the silence that followed felt almost worse. My heart was still pounding, but now the absence of sound made everything sharper. Every creak of the house, every howl of the wind outside. I stayed there, standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the window but too afraid to look out again. A part of me started to relax, telling myself that whatever I saw was gone, that maybe it was never really there at all. Just the storm playing tricks. I even laughed under my breath, trying to shake the feeling. But that relief didn't last long. The scratching started. Slow at first. A soft, deliberate scrape, like nails dragging across the glass. It was unmistakable. I froze, staring at the window as the sound grew louder. Someone or something was out there. I scrambled for my phone, hands shaking, trying to call someone. Anyone. My mom, a friend, even 911. But as soon as I unlocked the screen, the phone flickered and went dead. Just like that. I stared at the black screen in disbelief, my stomach twisting. No signal, no way to reach out. I was alone, swallowing hard. I forced myself to move, to glance out the window again. This time, the rain had slowed just enough for me to see more clearly. My heart nearly stopped. It was him. At first, I didn't believe it. Standing just outside in the downpour was my childhood friend. The one who had disappeared weeks ago. We'd all thought he was gone, presumed dead, never found. But there he was, standing inches away, his face pale, gaunt, drenched in rain. His eyes met mine through the glass, wide and pleading. But there was something off, something wrong. I froze in terror. He shouldn't be here. He couldn't be here. And yet he was staring at me. His lips silently forming words I couldn't hear but knew all too well. "Let me in." The scratching grew frantic, each drag of nails against the glass more desperate than the last. The figure outside wasn't just tapping now, it was clawing, like it was trying to rip its way in. I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming at me to look away, to move, but I couldn't. My eyes were locked on him. His face, it started to change. It was subtle at first, just a twitch of his lips, a slight distortion in his eyes. But then his features shifted, like they didn't quite fit together anymore. Something about him wasn't right, wasn't human. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and my hand drifted toward the door without thinking. He was still staring at me, pleading with those hollow, desperate eyes. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for the knob. Then, a massive crack of thunder split the air, rattling the entire house. I flinched, and in that instant he was gone, vanished into the storm. I stood there, trembling, my hand still hovering over the door. Had I imagined it all? Was it real? I wasn't sure anymore. The storm continued to rage outside, but the house felt emptier, colder, and I felt alone.
I was curled up on the couch, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. There was something soothing about the downpour, the way it drowned out the city's usual noise. It made everything inside feel cozier. The dim light from my lamp flickered slightly, but I didn't pay much attention. I sipped my tea and leaned further into the cushions, letting the evening slip by. Then, without warning, everything went dark. The hum of the appliances stopped. The gentle glow of the lamp vanished. My heart skipped a beat as the sudden silence pressed down on me. All I could hear now was the relentless rain and the distant rumble of thunder. It was strange how quickly the atmosphere shifted from peaceful to unsettling. I fumbled for my phone, the faint screen illuminating just enough to guide me through the apartment. As I made my way to the kitchen, the shadows seemed to stretch and bend in the corners of the room. I tried to ignore the growing unease, focusing instead on finding the flashlight I kept somewhere in one of these drawers. I finally found the flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive darkness, but it didn't feel like enough. The rain was louder now, pounding against the windows like it was trying to get in. As I made my way back through the hallway, something flickered in the corner of my eye. A shadow just there at the edge of my vision. Paused, turning quickly, but there was nothing. My heart rate spiked a little, but I shook it off. It's just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark, I told myself. I took a deep breath and continued down the hallway. Then I saw it again, closer this time, shifting against the wall. I spun around, aiming the flashlight where I thought I saw it. But again, nothing. The beam only illuminated the plain, empty space of my hallway. The silence was almost suffocating now, broken only by the steady drumming of the rain. I felt a tightness in my chest as I scanned the hallway again, this time slower, more deliberate. That's when it happened for the third time. The shadow flickered, then seemed to move, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on it. My skin prickled as the sensation of being watched crawled over me. Every step I took, it felt like the shadow moved with me, always just out of sight. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse in my throat. I stopped in the middle of the hallway, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but the creeping sense of dread was undeniable now. Something wasn't right. Something was here with me. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. The shadows were playing tricks on me, or so I wanted to believe. But something deep inside told me otherwise. I had to find out what was going on. The flashlight flickered slightly as I walked further down the hall, trying to push down the growing knot of fear in my stomach. That's when I saw it, a door. I blinked, confused. I had lived in this apartment for years, and yet there, tucked in a dark corner of the hallway, was a door I had never noticed before. How was that possible? My hand trembled as I brought the flashlight closer, illuminating the door's old, weathered frame. It looked out of place, almost ancient, like it had been hidden for years. I swallowed hard, gripping the handle. The metal was cold, and my fingers hesitated for a second before turning the knob. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a small room beyond. Dust hung heavy in the air, thick enough that it caught in the beam of my flashlight. The room was eerie. Old, forgotten objects littered the floor. Shelves lined the walls, filled with things that didn't belong here. Vintage trinkets, torn books, and cracked picture frames. My breath caught in my throat as I noticed the photographs. Dozens of them, scattered across the floor and shelves. All of them pictures of me. Some were from years ago, others more recent. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. There I was at the grocery store, walking to work, sitting in the park. Everyday moments of my life that I had no memory of being photographed. But the most disturbing part, I hadn't taken any of these pictures. Someone else had. And then I saw the last photo. It was me in bed, sleeping, taken just last night. My hands shook as I flipped through the photos, each one more horrifying than the last. I recognized the locations. My favorite cafe, the park where I walked every Sunday, the very streets outside this apartment. These weren't just random snapshots. Someone had been following me, documenting my life without me ever knowing. Then I saw it, the final photograph. It was me lying in bed. My hair spread across the pillow, the blanket pulled halfway up. I could almost hear my own soft breathing in that frozen moment. The timestamp in the corner made my blood run cold. Last night. A sudden chill filled the room, the air growing impossibly heavy. My breath hitched as I felt it. A presence behind me. Cold, uninvited. I didn't want to turn around, but something inside me screamed that I wasn't alone anymore. The shadow that had been lurking in the corners had materialized, and it was closer. Much closer. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting.